Good evening. I'm Peta, Alleyne. Welcome to a special CBC Presents Tonight, Barbados, a Republic. Our panel tonight, veteran constitutional attorney at law, Mr. Ezra Alleyne. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Alleyne.
Thank
And
you.
veteran Caribbean broadcaster and a managing director of the Jamaica Observer, Mr. Julian Rogers. Mr. Rogers, welcome.
Thank you, Vida.
Lecturer in history and head of department at the UWI, Dr. Henderson Carter. Dr. Carter, welcome.
Thank you.
And Warrant Officer Class 1, retired, Cherrol Deane. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Deane. Tonight, we're going to take a look at where we are as a republic, just a couple days old. But to do that, we're going to look back and then journey through to where we are today. And so we're looking forward to doing that with you. Remember, we do invite you to participate. You can be a part of the discussion. You can give us a call with your comments, your experiences at 228-5562 or 228-5563. And you can also post your comments on our Facebook page at CBC Barbados. We'll be back with our panel after the break. Monday, November 29th was the Pride of Nationhood, the declaration of the Republic and the installation of the President of Barbados. And that broadcast was certainly historic, and it just to say that it was an honor to be in that space and to feel the excitement of everyone is, I think, to do it an injustice. Ezra was there with us, also Warrant Officer Deane. Julian, I know that you had your YouTube channel on, watching all of the events. What was it like for you, not being able to be here physically, but watching it from Jamaica?
Well, to all intents and purposes, I was there physically because I, I had a diet of all the events that took place before, thanks to the NCF productions and the glorious, what I call was a rich display of the best of Barbados talent. And so I had, as you said, switched to the YouTube channel and tossed it from my phone to my TV set, or cast it, as they say. And it was on for hours and hours and hours. I mean, going back and forth, I was following all the developments and so on. Even when I went to my office, I still watched the activities in Barbados. And I have to say, as I did tell you, I felt very strongly Barbadian over these last days. Um, I know that many of us didn't quite know what to expect, so to speak. But I think that the entertainers, I think in particular, laid a tapestry for us that certainly was a good way to introduce us to the formality of this conversion from the independence on November 30th to the Republican format of government. So I really enjoyed myself. And as I told you a couple of days ago when you invited me to come on the show, there were so many highlights for me that I thought that I had a wonderful experience. And in fact, there were a couple of times that I did I choked. I know
Yeah.
that I choked on one of those performances by the police band of the national anthem, because I've for at that point I thought the words of the anthem were very prophetic and meant a great deal more than have meant, so to speak, over the last 55 years or so. And I was standing at attention in our living room and trying to sing along with the national anthem, and I couldn't get the
Yeah.
words out because I was so welled up. I mean, just thinking about it right now returns me to that feeling of pride. I really felt great pride at that moment.
I think for me, as I shared with you, and I'll share with everyone, the moment that we were stepping into a new era as a republic, the parliament buildings, the clock started to strike 12 times, started to strike 12. And it was like that moment, you were covered with goose pimples. And I remember looking to Ezra, and we both noticed at the same time that there went the clock striking midnight. It was well
And I have to
timed.
tell you, yeah, and Peter, as a broadcaster, I instinctively internalized and said, I hope no one says a word at this particular time, because the clock was the announcer. Not anybody else was required at this stage.
Lessons learned. I was silent. You just allow that to, I mean, and
That was the atmosphere.
that was the atmosphere, and everyone was quiet. It was hushed, just the chiming.
It, it, you
Dr.
know,
Carter, a historic event. What was that evening like for a historian? And we're going to look back at 1966. But for now, what was this moment in history like for you?
I think this was easily Barbados's finest moment. And, there were so many people watching, following the events. For me, I was very impressed with the parade. And, as I watched the entire event, what struck me forcefully was that Barbados is a place of vibrant culture. Barbados is a place where we can execute parades, we can execute activities of a high class. And the other thing, Peter, this event was followed by media all over the world, radio stations, television stations, followed the event, even as far as Brazil. They lit up the statue of Jesus the Redeemer in Beijing colors. and they were in solidarity with us. So I think, you know, when you look at it and when you go on the net and see the social media sites carrying the story, carrying the events, it tells you that the world was watching us. And sometimes, you know, we don't know how important we are in the global community. We think, yes, we're a small country, 166 square miles, but the world was watching this remarkable country, this country that has had smooth and fair elections, free and fair, since 1951. And, you know, I think it was indeed our finest hour.
Thank you for your comments about the military precision, because that is what it is. And you see the final outcome, but the rehearsals and the planning that go into that. This is a nice segue to have Cherrol join us, because it's always you know, such a pleasure to have him each independence to go through with us the various steps. And you come to learn at certain points what will take place. But on this particular night, you actually had His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales there, taking the royal salute on behalf of his mother. And that was going to be the final time that it would be a royal salute. Cherrol, for you, the moments that took place on that night.
Good night to all. I will admit that there are approximately three main highlights for me where that parade is concerned. One was the fact that it was a seamless and a flawless parade, well executed, and kudos must be given to not only the Chief of Staff, but also to the parade commander, Major Pedro Drakes, and also to the Force Sergeant Major and his team of instructors who went through the paces with both the armed and the unarmed units in ensuring that on this occasion, this historic occasion, once they came out into the public saw the cream on parade. The other highlight for me, having served in the Barbados Defense Force for just about 42 years, from 1975 when there was a regiment, was to see the old colors being marched off. Lieutenant Ramon Blackman with the Queen's color, Lieutenant Jamut with the regimental color, Warrant Officer Class 2 Wayne Griffith as the senior warrant officer, and Color Sergeant Seeley and Color Sergeant Ford as the two color escorts, to actually see that color marched off. And then to see the new colors being marched on parade. I must say that Lieutenant Dexter Hope would have felt, and I did mention this here to him before, you're going to feel very, very, very honored and proud to be that officer, to carry the presidential colors on parade for the very first time. And young Calendar from the Coast Guard, and the other officer with the regimental color, Lieutenant David Adamson, and the other members of the color party. That was the other highlight for me. And then to see the unarmed units that would normally participate in the Independence Parade on this occasion, because of the space, being represented by one officer and the color party, and their performance was of a very high standard.
Ezra, I know that the moment when His Royal Highness arrived and we had the license plate discussion because then the president-elect arrived and her license plate was bare, but we were aware that it was going to change. You had some interesting comments about the seamless transition that was occurring and the discussion that would have taken place between Buckingham Palace and Bridgetown.
All of that would have taken place as a prelude to what we saw, because the old order was changing and giving way to the new. And these indicators were indicators consistent with the constitutional change that was taking place. And it was important that the people, the source of power, could see exactly what was happening and how the president, the new head of state, was in fact and in law receiving her authority to reflect the constitutional changes, which were very important and are very important to us, because the form and substance of sovereignty have now been fused in one solid bond. No longer do we have a head of state who is located elsewhere, but we now have a head of state located here. We've changed to a parliamentary republic. We reflect, in fact, in form and in substance, that political power comes from the people and is exercised by the elected members of parliament. And things like the license plate, the lowering of the colours, all of these are important formal indicators of the transfer of executive power from Buckingham Palace to Bridgetown. I think that was significant. It's very significant that the people of Barbados see the ritual which formalizes in the broad, if you like, pictorial sense, what was done in Parliament, and the law, the function, and the popular seal is exhibited for everyone to see. We now have our own president.
Our own head of state. I wish sometimes people could see, and I was going to bring them, but you know, sometimes memory, the little notes that you'd send me throughout the broadcast, powerful moment, you know, what a transition. See, I loved receiving them.
But
I
you
did.
see, that's because from a constitutional perspective, this was a moment which was bound to come at some stage, and which should have come before. You cannot have a situation where, for example, I'm going to give you a specific example here. So James Cameron Tudor can go to Oxford, become president of the Oxford Union, which is one of the things that the British, our former rulers, regard as a significant achievement. But he could not qualify to be president of his own country, whereas he goes to London, goes to Oxford, and he persuades his fellow students, British born and born elsewhere, to elect him as president of one of the most revered institutions. But when he comes back to Barbados, in due course, he could never become president of his native country, because we were still under the thumb of the colonial masters. But when he was there, he was effectively showing that he was equal to and superior in that particular instance of his British peers, but yet couldn't qualify because of the system we had to be.
Thank you for that, because perhaps we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, let's discuss the system that was. Let us take a look at perhaps the movements to independence, because if you really think about it, you know, Barbados was self-governing since, I think, Dr. Carter, you mentioned 1951, but you know, Going to take a break, and when we come back, let's take a look at that move towards independence, that first step. You're watching CBC Presents tonight, a special edition, Barbados, a Republic. And we have certainly an esteemed panel here with us this evening. And gentlemen, don't wait for me to ask you, questions or to comment. Please feel free to jump in at any time. I'm going to take the caller that we have on the line at the moment first, and then I want to just take a quick jump, if we can, back to 1966, where it all began. But we say good evening and welcome to our caller. Hello, good evening. I'm not hearing the caller, are you? Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Ah, there you are. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. I want to discuss myself about this matter of the Republic. I'm supporting both the Republic and Independence. But I want to ask the public and these gentlemen there on this program, how can you clarify a Republic and Independence when you have put the bathwater out of adult suffrage? I'm worried very much about it. Over the years, I sit down and I hear nothing about adult suffrage. This is our first line in this country. Barbados become what it is through adult suffrage, and I'm worried about it. These people are praising independence and the Republic. What has happened to adult suffrage?
Ezra, Julian.
Sorry,
Yeah.
nothing has happened to adult. You go, Julian.
No, I'm sorry. This is not a calling program of the type that we will be dismissive of anybody who calls like that. The constitutional lawyer is here. The historian is here. I'm only a journalist.
But let me take this point.
Yes, you go ahead, Ezra.
We've not dismissed or ignored adult suffrage. Adult suffrage is the very foundation. That is what Sir Grantley Adams fought for. One man, one vote, to enable us to elect the People's Parliament to make the demands in due course for independence, which leads inevitably to a republic. So that when you talk about independence, you are, by deep implication, accepting and honoring the idea that we have adult suffrage. Without adult suffrage, I don't think we could ever have had independence. We would never have had the representation in Parliament of the majority, the choice of the majority of the people, and we would have gone back to the old system of a form of representation which effectively enslaved, in more ways than one, the black majority population and gave an advantage to the minority enfranchised group of planters and other persons, so that adult suffrage is the very foundation on which we have planted our democracy. Hence, Sir Grantley is the father of democracy, and the Right Excellent Errol Barra is the father of independence. But independence, I do not think, can possibly predate adult suffrage. So adult suffrage is at the foundation of our current democracy.
Dr. Carter.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Ezra. I mean, in 1935, only 3,500 people voted in Barbados. But in that election, that first election under adult suffrage, 95,000 people voted that election in December 1951. And not only did it usher in the black middle class, but it removed the old planter merchant elite from office. And you have therefore a black middle class coming up with policies for development. So, for example, you have a tourism product being developed as early as the 1950s. You have the expansion of education because for the first time, you have an assembly that represents the majority of the people. So I agree with Ezra that this is the foundation for our democracy. This is the foundation for our economic development. But I think, Peter, you were raising a point earlier
Mm-hmm.
about the movements towards independence. And I
Yes.
want to categorize those movements into two sections.
Okay.
First, there are revolutionary movements. And sometimes we forget that enslaved blacks were fighting for independence as early as 1675 when coffee, these Akan Negroes in Spicetown and those plantations above Spicetown plotted to overthrow the government and to set up an African kingdom. And they built a ceremonial stool. Of course, that rebellion, that plot was discovered, and the rebels were beheaded in Spicetown. And then in 1816, you have another revolutionary measure. And this time, this is Bussa who
Mm-hmm.
leads the fight. And they actually created a flag. I call it the first independence flag for Barbados. They created a flag in 1816. If you Google it, if you Google Endeavour flag, you will see the flag on the net. This flag is located in the British Museum. And I hope now, as a republic, we would ask that that flag be returned to us.
Yes.
So we have, therefore, 1675, 1816, another revolutionary attempt in 1875, 1876, sorry, and then one in 1937. Those are the revolutionary attempts. And then there
Okay.
are
Okay. I'm going to
constitutional.
ask you, sorry, I have a little time, but I just want to warn you that we're going to have to take a pause for the lotteries in a little bit. So continue your statement,
Yeah,
but I
okay,
will be interrupting you.
no problem. And then we have the constitutional movements. In my view, starting with the Bush experience experiment in 1946, giving persons like Adams and Crawford an opportunity to sit on the executive committee and get around the table and make decisions. Of course, the governors in control, but you have for the first time the middle class blacks at the table. Then we go to 1951, 1950-51, then ministerial government in 1954, and that sets the tone for independence in 1966. So those, in a nutshell, are the constitutional and the revolutionary attempts to independence.
Okay. Perfect place for us to take a pause, and we will be back after the break. If you've just joined us, you're watching CBC Presents this evening, a special edition, Barbados a Republic. And our panel this evening, Mr. Ezra Alleyne, attorney at law, veteran constitutional attorney. We have Mr. Julian Rogers, veteran Caribbean broadcaster, journalist, and managing director of the Jamaica Observer. We have Dr. Henderson Carter, who is a lecturer in history and the head of department at the UWI, and a warrant officer class 1, retired. Mr. Cherrol, Deane, is also joining us. And just before we took a break, gentlemen, we were discussing a very interesting flag, and I do believe that we've managed to source it. Dr. Carter, perhaps you could describe what we're looking at?
Yes. This is the Endeavour flag, created in 1816, just before the rebellion broke out, created by the rebels. And we have a flag. On the right-hand side, you see a black man and his wife. There's another black man to the left of that, in the middle of the flag. There is a white soldier to your left, and of course a British ship. And perhaps you may be wondering, why would these Bussa enslaved blacks create a flag and include British soldiers, British ships? In 1816, these enslaved Africans were seeking freedom, and they were always on the lookout for their free papers from the king, their free papers from Britain. And their view was that Britain and Wilberforce was in an alliance with them, wanted to have their freedom, but that the platters wanted to keep them in slavery. So therefore, here this is my interpretation, that the enslaved blacks were trying to seek an alliance with the British government, with the British soldiers, and to carry out that rebellion, to topple the planters and the merchants who held them in slavery. So this is a very important flag, and I hope that we would be able to show Barbadians the importance of that flag going forward, because it really suggests that the 1816 rebellion was all about freedom and independence.
Right.
Okay.
We remember, of course, the great novel, the play as well, Growing Up Stupid, under the Union Jack. If colonialism had a personality or certain traits, how would one describe it? And Julian, you are, a wordsmith. I think of, adjectives such as the word subjugation. I think of the word control. The control of one particular power over another, that sort of thing. But what kind of adjectives would you use to describe colonial times? How would you describe living under the Union Jack?
And growing up stupid, but then I thought it's interesting to ask a question like that, because in all this period of discussion and exploring the constitutional change of Barbados, I was struck by one thing, that here I am holding a certificate in English history, and I could tell you about the War of the Roses and the Tudors and much more, but that we missed more than a generation of education about us as a Caribbean society. I can only thank a number of people like Rex Nettleford and Professor Auger at the University of the West Indies for opening our eyes, and many more of the historians, of course, of Europe, plus people like Professor Hilary Beckles and so on, who really have opened our eyes to ask us to look very carefully at our history. And I'm glad that our historian here has taken the opportunity to share with us the history that we should know about. Because we have this problem where we go around discounting any such look back at that history. And I think, for instance, the work of Alleyne Motley many decades ago, who asked us to have a look at our history and to recognize the value of that history to our very being today, so that we have an educational system that has given us some education, yes, not to be entirely discounted, but the reality is that there's been a major gap in our education, and therefore we've grown up stupid about our history, our real history. And that, I think, is a challenge that we face now in having people recognize the value of this conversion. In the debate that we're having right now really is one debate that should have taken place back in the 60s at the time of independence. And
Exactly.
therefore, we would not have been going now to being a Republican form of government. We would have done that already. And therefore, there would not have been the need for the various commissions and the various political back and forthing, not just in Barbados, but certainly, as you hear from the reaction of many other Caribbean states now, Barbados has gone and done it. Why can't we do it too?
But they've not been very successful when they've put it to referendum. You know,
There's a
people
reason for that,
have
Peter.
said no, and that's why I'm going to ask why.
There's a reason for that. It is a lack of the education required for the general populace to understand exactly what you're asking them to vote for. And I'm sure that Ezra would be able to reinforce this, because the thing is that to come at the last minute to ask people to understand what these issues are is one of the most difficult things, and particularly at a time now where everybody is exposed to all kinds of contending voices, forces, and everything else. And therefore, it is a far longer period of what I call re-education required to get people to the position of understanding and appreciating what you're talking about. And therefore, I've heard people say that Mia Motley's decision, of course, was bold and so on. But the boldness really is born of a long history of a discussion about this whole form of government. So it is not so much bold as much as somebody deciding, hey, our time has come. We got to do this.
Right, Ezra?
I'm going to say two things here. The education point, or the lack of education, is an extremely important point. Apart from education about the history, we don't even teach our students sufficiently widely about civics. So they don't, I think, get an understanding of the current system of government, far less the history of how we got here. The other thing is this, on this education point, there's an extraordinarily important work, I think, that needs to be widely published. In the context in which we're speaking, Dr. Richard Cheltenham has written a thesis on the constitutional development of Barbados from 46 to 66. I think that thesis should be widely published because it captures the events that took place from the Bush experiment leading all the way through to independence. It's deposited in the university library. These are things that we should have, if you like, widely available. The other thing that strikes me is this. Right Excellent Ezra did not like the idea of a referendum being put into the Constitution of Barbados. He said it positively, that he's not interested in it. His speech on January the 4th, 1966 says it. He was absolutely right. He understood the constitutional system. You don't put a referendum in there when that is the greatest check and balance against constitutional change. And you don't do that, I would think, if you're going to change to a republic, given the nature of the misunderstandings possible about what you're doing based on the fact that we grew up stupid under the Union Jack.
Mhm.
It's a very difficult task. And I think that Prime Minister Barrow and Prime Minister Motley were ad idem on that point, and it was absolutely correct then. It is correct now.
Yes,
And I
it's.
think
Go ahead, Dr. Carter.
also that another reason for not having the referendum in '66 and today is that um, in '66 in particular, the strength of the colonial imprint was still there. And there were a lot of
Yes,
people who wanted Barbados to remain as a colony. Then there were others who wanted Barbados to go to independence as a federation. The point
Federation.
that I want to make is that even when Sir Menzies Cox had his commission in the 70s, he said that there were
right.
still a lot of traditionalists who oppose republicanism. So that even
True.
13 years after independence, the strength of that colonial imprint was still evident. And remember, in '66, there were many people who left Barbados and went to live
Exactly.
in New Zealand and Australia, etc. So Barrow could not even contemplate a Republican status in '66.
No.
Okay,
Because
we're gonna.
those person,
Sorry,
sorry,
I was
I
saying
was
we're
about
going
to
to
say
take a
those,
quick break. Can I come back to you after the break, Ezra?
Mhm.
Um,
as you please, ma'am.
don't
Yes,
miss your point. All right, we'll
I
take a
won't.
quick break and we'll be back. Ezra, continue. I
Yeah, I
interrupted
was,
you.
no problem. I was picking up on Henderson's point because you have to be pragmatic as a leader. And if some of your people are pulling out because they don't agree with the policies, you have to be very careful because um, economic power and substance matters, particularly to a newly independent country. And you cannot make the move or make moves that would have the indirect impact of destabilizing your economy, for example. That's the one point I wanted to make. The other point is that sitting as deputy chairman at the time of the Cox Commission, I can confirm that there was a very strong resistance which we got about moving forward towards a Republican state at that stage. And therefore, the committee was forced, if I may say so, by the evidence to report that not yet. There wasn't that widespread acceptance at that stage. So that the time has come. And if we were
What,
not
what,
growing up, sorry,
what happened as well in that period, and I want to comment on that point, Ezra, is that
yes,
even though Barbados did not go to republicanism in that 55
yeah,
years, there were
hmm
some very important steps that led up to the period. In other words,
yeah,
very important steps to show people that we are now determining our destiny. And I just want to repeat some of them. The establishment of
yeah,
CXC in 1972
Yeah.
to have Caribbean exams instead of
hmm
British
Yeah.
Cambridge and London exams. Then you have the CCJ in 2005, moving away from
extraordinarily
the
important.
Judicial Committee, the
Yeah,
Privy Council. These are,
yeah,
and even the formation of ICB and BNB in 1978 to establish economic institutions that were supposed to control the commanding heights of the economy. Those were
and not
measures,
so,
in my view,
yeah,
to establish ourselves and to show that
yeah,
we are now in control of our own destiny.
yeah. I think the CCJ was an extraordinarily important constitutional advance because the
Hmm.
Privy Council or some external body interpreting your laws is really having a definitive influence on what happens in your country. And the establishment of the CCJ would send a strong signal that we can determine that particular aspect of our future. And we cannot less count the establishment of the Faculty of Law at Cave Hill in 1970. That
Hmm.
played a very important part in
Certainly.
producing our independent, if you like, Caribbean lawyers who could bring a Caribbean interpretation to the law, because the law, after all, is not an abstract science. It's something which is applied in a particular context. That too was a sign of our maturing independence, if anybody really required to see how we were progressing. The, um, the credit union movement as well, another
Yes,
major step
yes.
in placing in local hands um, a very important aspect of the financial economy. Very important from the point of view of stabilizing the economy in the kind of hands that would not move if you made another
Mhm.
indication that you were going to become a republic, because their roots were embedded in the soil of Barbados, so to speak. All of these things became necessary to ensure that we were going to have the proper foundation in every respect to become a republic.
So, what then does this mean for us now? We have made the step, we were independent, and now we are definitely independent. We no longer have the Queen as our head of state, we have our own head of state. And what does this mean for us now? As a matter of fact, there are still people who are asking the question, what's a parliamentary republic opposed to what? There are questions about the United States model, the Trinidad model, the Guyanese model. Where does Barbados fit in with that? And perhaps we can take a look at those questions. And also, how do we continue to celebrate us moving forward? Formally, it has been, we have had the regiment and then the Barbados Defence Force and so on, who have celebrated along with us and been quite formal with the British model. But what happens next? We're going to take a look at that when we come back. Okay, so we want to continue with that then. I thought I had one more break, but I don't. So let me move that question to you. Who
Yeah,
would like to take that one
yeah.
first?
I,
Ezra,
I want
perhaps
to
you?
start with the first
No,
question.
Okay.
go ahead, Doctor.
You asked
Okay,
what does
Dr.
it mean
Carter,
for
go ahead.
us now we are independent. I think we now have to get down to the task of nation building, building out our nation. And there's 6 ways, I think, but more than six, but I want to suggest 6 ways in which we could dedicate our tasks, we meaning government and of course the people, dedicate our tasks to nation building. The first is educational excellence. We have to place that high on the agenda to make all of our schools places of excellence. Secondly, healthy mind, healthy body. Health is paramount, health is critical going forward. We can't have a healthy republic without healthy bodies, healthy minds. Thirdly, we have to pay more attention, and I'm glad that the government is doing that, at maximizing our cultural and heritage resources and even our land resources. I still think that we have too much wasteland in the country. Fourthly, we have to concentrate on sporting and artistic excellence. We have a lot, we have done a lot. And I think that we've missed the ball a little bit about not really supporting cricket, which has given us glory in the international forum. And then we also have, in my view, to make the public service a more responsive place so that we that public officers serve well and make sure that when they deal with matters they're more responsive. And finally, we have to promote the national beauty of our country. Our country is a beautiful country. If you go to the Scotland district, you're blown away. We need to show people that this is a beautiful country and create beautiful spaces. And I think the government is on the right track in doing that, creating beautiful spaces. And, even this really beautiful Newton Burial Ground is going to be beautiful. Golden Square, very impressed with it. These are some ways in which the citizenry can get down to the task of nation building.
Ezra, and Cherrol, I'm going to come to you after Ezra with my questions, how will we celebrate formally moving forward. But Ezra, in terms of the questions that people have been asking and the concerns that they have had about the type of Republican status.
Well, my simple answer to that is this, that we have followed the Westminster model. We have a parliamentary republic. Parliament has been elected by the people. In the Republican system, the people have the power. What we have done is to make absolutely sure that we have our sovereignty and that the reflective power of the people in Parliament, together with our own head of state, seals the idea of the republic. And we're not following the American model, where the president is not in the legislature. It seems to be the better way to get things done to have your prime minister in the legislature. There are some theoretical concerns about that, sometimes practical concerns, but the point is, the Westminster system allows you to get things done. The American system, as it is now, has a number of obstacles to the proper execution of power. President Biden has his problems with the Congress. In the Westminster system and in the Barbados system, we don't have those obstacles, so that we could get our National Health Service established like the British did in one shot. The Americans have had their decades-long problems trying to get that kind of beneficial policy enacted, because in that system, virtually every senator is a mini prime minister or mini president, and they can all create problems for the president. The Westminster system, I think, works. Whatever its defects, it concentrates power at the center, it gets the job done, and if the electorate has its concerns about the way power is exercised, they have the ultimate power, as Mr. Barrow says, to dispose of the government. But it gets things done. And once we educate the public sufficiently well, they can keep the feet of the the powerful people, of those who inhabit the corridors of power. They can hold their feet to the fire, because in a parliamentary republic, the people have the last repository of power.
I think that one of the concerns, though, that many people have is that five-letter word, 5 or 6, reform, you know, 6. When you're looking at the word constitutional reform, and people have a concern about that. And so therefore, I think that you're saying that, you know, basically nothing much has changed, only the fact that we have a Barbadian head of state, and that should allay some fears. Julian.
Well, it is.
Sorry. I was going to ask Julian, now that he's within a country that we are hearing them say now that for their 60th anniversary that they would like to move towards the road to the Republic. What are the discussions that are happening now since Barbados has taken our step?
Well, I can give you the feedback of the last 3 days or so. The first reaction was that of the opposition leader, Bruce Golding, of the People's National Party, who said that when they return to government, they will certainly take Jamaica down the Republican road. And then yesterday, we got this very outstanding letter from former Prime Minister Peta, calling on both of the current leaders, that is Prime Minister Holness and the opposition leader, Bruce Golding, to sit down and forge a program to ensure that Jamaica becomes a Republican state by the next anniversary of independence, which will be the 60th. Remember, Jamaica was the first to leave the Federation, immortalized in that great lecture by the Sparrow, 1 from 10 reads nothing. So the discussions are reviving discussions of a long time ago of both the political parties and the general populace, etc. So we'll have to see where that goes.
How are we going to celebrate us formally? Has that been discussed as yet, Cherrol? Or, you know, will the changes that we saw on Monday be the ones which we will have moving forward?
Yes, the changes that we saw on Monday were the ones that we'll be going forward with. But I would like to also state that we need this whole concept of continual education of the populace as it relates to what it means to be a republic country. I would also state that there is some changes. The notion that the Barbados flag is changing is still hanging out there, and you know, we need to put it to rest. What has changed are the colors of the Barbados Regiment, which now moves from the Queen's color to the presidential color. And there's still the regimental color, but the presidential color is the senior color. And with the old colors on the Queen's color, the upper left was the sign E2R, which stood for Elizabeth Reign II. That has been replaced with the presidential seal or the presidential emblem. And on the regimental color, which is the green one that you can see to your right, at the top of that was a crown. In the center was a crown, and that has also been replaced by the presidential emblem. Now, what some of the other changes that will happen will be, for example, Government House, that will be renamed State House. And then we have, for example, at the Barbados Coast Guard, the base as Her Majesty Barbados Ship Pelican, and then the various ships, Her Majesty Barbados Ship Robert Louis, Leonard C. Banfield. Those two will be renamed, and within the various services, that is the defense force, the police, the fire, the prison service, those officers who formerly wore a crown on their epaulette as part of their badge of rank, that crown has been replaced with the trident. And the warrant officers in the Barbados Defense Force who formerly wore a crown on their right arm, that has been replaced also with the coat of arms, and the force sergeant major as the senior enlisted soldier in the Barbados Defense Force. His badge of rank is now the coat of arms surrounded by a wreath of 11 Pride of Barbados flowers to represent the 11 parishes in Barbados. It is natural that once we become a republic and the Barbados Regiment have been granted new colors, that the next step would be for those colors, the old colors, to be formally laid up at a church service. In Jamaica, they refer to the garrison church, which is a park camp. But we in Barbados always refer to St. Matthias Church as the garrison church, and it is expected that those colors will be laid up there because you don't burn and you don't just throw them away. And also following that will be the trooping of the colors. This gives all of the soldiers the opportunity to see their colors paraded in front of them and to be able to recognize the colors. And I'm sure that whenever we have our Republic Day parade again, it will be the same. You'd have the arrival of the President, Her Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason, and the parade will continue as normal.
And as president, I think you mentioned that now she has a 21 gun salute.
Well, as head of state.
As head of state.
Even as head of state. Even in her role as Governor General, as head of state, she will be entitled to a 21 gun salute. And a Prime Minister will be entitled to an 18 gun salute. It diminishes according to the rank that you have or the appointment that you hold within the country.
Ezra, once again, this is, and Dr. Carter, I think that I'm going to ask you all, gentlemen, because we stole some time, you have final words, what all of this means to you personally and what you think it will mean for us as an independent nation.
Well, for me, the whole thing.
We have broken away. Go ahead, Ezra. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Doctor.
Well, we have broken away finally. We are on our own, and it means duties and responsibilities. It means that we have to step up to the plate. We have to determine, all of us, to make this country a wonderful country. I was following the social media and some people were saying, well, this is going to be Haiti number 2, that Barbados is going to regress into a poverty-stricken state. We have a responsibility as a nation to ensure that does not happen, that this state continues to be a global leader, a state that is vibrant, a state that is on the move, and we can only do it when we start what we call the nation building process.
Thank you. Julian?
I think very quickly that the strength of this move, I think, is exemplified by the involvement of the diaspora community. I had the honor of chairing a session with them, and I think that, and not just one session, but several sessions leading up. I think there's a far greater awareness now of the value of the diaspora community and the development of Barbados, and I think that this really wakes up everybody, and also wakes up our supporters beyond the Barbadian heritage, so to speak. I think the rest of the Caribbean has come alive with the possibilities, and I think we can see more moves in this direction in the years to come.
Thank you. Ezra, final
Yeah,
words.
I'm sure that the case has been made that Barbadians in particular are leaders not only in their own country, but virtually in every country in the world. You can find a Barbadian who is in a leading position. Now, we are leaders by nature. We love our country. All we have to do is put our heads down and work for the betterment of the country, having regard to our history as leaders virtually in every country in this world.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening on a very special CBC Presents. We couldn't let the week end without tying it all together, and it definitely was a pleasure to share the broadcast with Ezra and Cherrol on Monday, and this now with Dr. Carter and Julian. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to thank our viewers for joining us this evening. I certainly hope that our discussion has cleared up a number of issues that you might have had, a number of concerns you might have had. And I wish each and every one of you happy independence. Yes, we're still celebrating, and happy republic. You know, we finally made that move, as Dr. Carter said, to being fully independent. Stay safe and stay well.